The thing that is exciting about filmmaking is to think back to the moment in time right before you had the idea. And think about that at the moment that you're standing on the set and there are thousands of people around and they've built this huge set and there are all these actors and there's all this energy and all this focus, and realize that it's all in the service of something that was made up out of whole cloth. You know, I mean, that's fun. I mean, that's what an architect must feel like when they drive down the street and they look up and see a building that they designed. It's something that you imagined made tangible. But there's a time on the set when it's new and you can walk into it and you can see it, and it's this physical, tangible manifestation of pure imagination. As much fun as that is, it becomes a curse the next time you sit down and face the blank CRT and you have to come up with something, because you know that there's going to be a moment in time when everybody's going to be standing around having built this and having gathered to do it, and you better think of something good. I grew up on a steady diet of science fiction. Arthur Clarke and A.E. Van Vogt, all the mainstream old guard of science fiction at that time. I was always absorbed in a book, which took my mind to other worlds and satisfied in a narrative form this insatiable sense of curiosity that I had. And you know, I was a real science geek, but it was all about trying to understand the world, understand the limits of possibility. And I was an artist. I could draw, I could paint, and so my response to this was to paint, to draw alien creatures, alien worlds, robots, spaceships, all that stuff. I was endlessly getting busted in math class, you know, doodling behind the textbook. My brain was going in all these different directions. Art was always sort of there, I was always drawing, but it hadn't really manifested itself as the main thing. And all the way through high school, even into college, I majored in physics. And even though my grades were very high in astronomy and physics, I switched to English because I wanted to write. And I didn't find my true course until I was 25 or 26 before I really settled in and said, this is it, this is the decision, I'm going to work in film in some capacity. But I also realized that I was going to have to get busy and create my own thing, that nobody would hire me and just put me on a film. I'd have to create my own thing and hang on tenaciously to that in order to be able to direct again. And that's why I wrote Terminator, and I had many, many people trying to buy that script, but I wouldn't sell them. I wouldn't sell the script to them unless I went with it as the director, and of course that was a turnoff for almost everybody. But we did find one low-budget producer who was willing to make the film, and that was John Daly at Hemdale, and that's how I got my real start.
A piece of art is never finished, it's just abandoned. What's your take on that?
I think that it's pried out of your fingers by reality.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? I mean, I think it's fine if you're a playwright or you're a novelist, but nobody, you don't publish a screenplay.
Yeah.
You release a film. So the screenplay is a means to an end in my mind. It's not some sacred document. It's a working document, and from that your various departments can go off and start designing props and costumes and set pieces and creatures and all that, and then you're going to go get some actors, and then the actors are going to come in and then they'll breathe life into the characters. And so for me it's a process of constant kind of discovery and refinement throughout the whole. Where the film ultimately gets abandoned is when the release date is 2 weeks down the line.
Exactly.
You've got to make some decision, you know. But by then I think all of the major decisions have been made, and now you're tweaking, you're just refining sound and trying to finish the visual effects. And of course the stories that I chose to tell were science fiction stories: Terminator, Aliens, and then The Abyss. And with The Abyss, something interesting came out of The Abyss, which was that to solve a specific narrative problem on that film, which was to create this kind of liquid water creature, we actually embraced computer-generated animation, CG, and this resulted in the first soft surface character CG animation that was ever in a movie. And even though the film didn't make any money, barely broke even, I should say, I witnessed something amazing, which is that the audience, the global audience, was mesmerized by this apparent magic. You know, it's Arthur Clarke's law that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. They were seeing something magical.
And so that got me very excited, and I thought, wow, this is something that needs to be embraced into the cinematic art. So with Terminator 2, which was my next film, we took that much farther. Working with ILM, we created the liquid metal dude in that film, and the success hung in the balance on whether that effect would work, and it did, and we created magic again, and we had the same result with an audience, although we did make a little more money on that one.
Hasta la vista, baby.
So I wrote this piece called Avatar, which was meant to absolutely push the envelope of visual effects, of CG effects, beyond, with realistic, human, emotive characters generated in CG, and the main characters would all be in CG, and the world would be in CG. And you know, the envelope pushed back, and I was told by the folks at my company that we weren't going to be able to do this for a while, so I shelved it. And I made this other movie about a big ship that sinks. And, you know, I went in and pitched it to the studio as Romeo and Juliet on a ship. It's going to be this epic romance, passionate film. Secretly, what I wanted to do was I wanted to dive to the real wreck of Titanic, and that's why I made the movie. And that's the truth. Now, the studio didn't know that, but I convinced them. I said, we're going to dive to the wreck, we're going to film it for real, we'll be using it in the opening of the film, it'll be really important, it'll be a great marketing hook, and I talked them into funding an expedition. Sounds crazy, but this goes back to that theme about, you know, your imagination creating a reality. Because it actually created a reality where 6 months later I found myself in a Russian submersible 2.5 miles down in the North Atlantic looking at the real Titanic through a viewport. Not a movie, not HD, for real. Well, Titanic was conceived as a love story, and if I could have done it without one visual effect, I would have been more than happy to do that. But it turned out that obviously it was a big visual effects show before we were all said and done. But that wasn't really my motivation to make the film, and I don't think that should ever be the motivation to make a film. That it should be a means to an end. It was definitely a goal of Titanic to integrate a very personal, very emotional, and very intimate filmmaking style with spectacle. I think the spectacle got people's attention, got them to the theaters, and then the emotional, cathartic experience of watching the film is what made the film work. I think the spectacle served it, but was not the defining factor in its success. Once again, I think it's a question of balance. It's sort of like looking at a painting and saying what part of the painting is the part that makes you like it. It's sort of all of it, and it's all of it working together that makes you like the painting.
Well, look, it's easy to have an idea. Mm-hmm. It's showing up day to day, and you know, you have your morning coffee, and then you sit there and say, okay, now what am I going to do?
Yeah.
You know, and then you just dive into it and you start writing scenes. I think the hardest part is what I call the startup torque. Mm-hmm. It's that moment when you've got the general idea and you've got to get into a process, and the characters haven't really come alive yet. Once the characters come alive, they kind of, you know, writers like to say they write themselves.
Yeah.
You know, of course they don't write themselves, but you start to be able to channel your mind through the lens of different characters. And then it becomes much easier and it flows faster. So to me, it's an accelerating curve. I start out writing pages very slowly, and then toward the end, I might be writing 5-10 pages a day.
Oh, yeah.
It's just screaming out.
Yeah.
But all of that is necessary. It's not like you could chop off the first half of the process.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you do is I think it's important for any writer to just maintain output.
Oh,
Just sit down and write something by the end of the day. Now, you may come in the next day and think, man, what the hell was I thinking, and throw it out. In which case, in retrospect, that day was not productive. But you always want to be productive. And then some days you just it just goes nuts on you, and all of a sudden you've got some great scene you never even thought you were going to write. And I find that those are the scenes you always hold on to, because it's that kind of inspiration that just popped out of nowhere.
The Terminator's an infiltration unit. Part man, part machine.
Get out.
I know what I've tried to do, which is tell stories that excite the imagination and maybe say something at a thematic level, maybe something about the human condition.
You think you're safe and alive? You're already dead. Everybody, you're dead already. This whole place, everything you see is gone.
Our human relationship with technology.
You just can't go around killing people.
Why?
What do you mean why? Because you can't.
Why?
Because you just can't, okay? Trust me on this.
to allow people to step through that screen into that world, whatever it is, whether it's the world of the Abyss or the world of the Terminator or Titanic, to let people live in that, create that space for them, and let them live in the shoes of those characters for a while. That's what I set out to do. Curiosity. It's the most powerful thing you own. Imagination is a force that can actually manifest a reality. And the respect of your team is more important than all the laurels in the world. I have young filmmakers come up to me and say, give me some advice for doing this. And I say, don't put limitations on yourself. Other people will do that for you. Don't do it to yourself. Don't bet against yourself. And take risks. NASA has this phrase that they like, failure is not an option. But failure has to be an option in art and in exploration, because it's a leap of faith. And no important endeavor that required innovation was done without risk. You have to be willing to take those risks. So that's the thought I would leave you with, is that in whatever you're doing, failure is an option, but fear is not. Thank you.